By now, I'm sure everyone who's watching this video has heard of Hollow Knight, the game that gave Dark Souls a run for its money, and the game that changed the landscape for indie games. Metroidvanias were always a popular choice among solo developers, but we've never really seen anything quite like what's happening right now. Many more indie games are getting the spotlight thanks to creators on YouTube and other platforms who have developed their pages around Hollow Knight and similar games. Hollow Knight has been around long enough for developers to cite it as inspiration for their own games now, and this is clearly seen when scrolling through Metroidvanias on Kickstarter. I've played several of the demos these games are offering now, and I thoroughly enjoyed my experience, so I'm happy most of these games are getting funded. Then of course we look over at Crowsworn's Kickstarter. Already blowing the game's stretch goals out of the water with over 10,000 backers and counting. So then why? Why is it that this game specifically is getting tons of love? Let's get into it. So first and most obvious, this is the most accurate Hollow Knight successor you'll find right now. Graphics and mechanics seem very similar from trailers and descriptions, and they even share the same marketing guy as Team Cherry. I'd have to assume that fans of Hollow Knight feel as though Crowsworn has been verified when hearing that. It's a pretty safe bet that Crowsworn will be a complete experience. And it's weird to say Hollow Knight's successor when Silksong hasn't even come out yet, but I digress. This is a game that Hollow Knight fans are collectively excited for, and the more hyped each person gets, the more hyped we all are. And that's by no means a negative. It's fun to be a part of something like this. It's why events like E3 are so exciting. However, before I go too far into Hollow Knight comparisons, I want to talk about how Crowsworn stands on its own. Let's talk about that trailer. You know what this trailer reminds me of? Hell, but like the cool 90s Hell where everything is radical and badass. It's impressive how it's able to keep that high intensity of the opening cinematic throughout the rest of the gameplay shown. This thing has me sold because it knows what it's trying to be. Cool as shit. Like all good trailers, there are a number of areas, enemies, and moves shown to accent the variety on the table. Music is obviously an important feature, and this trailer has a high intensity track that syncs well with the gameplay shown. It peaks at tight combat situations, and the whole thing scratches the surface of its breaking point by showing a few bosses and potentially a late game teaser. It leaves you wanting more, which is important for Kickstarter trailers because where are fans going to go find more? The Kickstarter. All around great stuff. So between all this, it's no surprise to say that Crowsworn got funded immediately, but let's talk about those reward tiers. Rewards are one of the most important things when it comes to Kickstarters because they convince people to give you lots of money. If we look at the chart from the Kickstarter page, you'll see that there's a balance of more reasonably priced rewards that lots of fans can afford, as well as a limited selection of higher price rewards for big donors. This gives lots of opportunities as well as incentive for people to donate at the tier they can afford. But it's not all about scamming in-love Hollow Knight fans out of their money. The developers are open and honest by leaving a detailed description of their product status, developer history, frequently asked questions, and spending. This is the kind of stuff you have to show if you want to build a good relationship with your backers. Keeping trust is important, especially with long waits between a campaign's end and the release of a product. Then there are the stretch goals, i.e. the incentive for people to keep backing the project once it's reached its initial goal. It's common with games on Kickstarter to settle for less as a start in hopes of being able to add more features later, but features cost money, and a seemingly impossible funding goal can scare off backers. Adding stretch goals makes the journey feel more rewarding. Just like in game design, continuing reveals and rewards keeps players, or in this case backers, I guess, interested. Though I may be overanalyzing here. Regardless, it's great to see that Crowsworn is on track to meet most of its stretch goals, because a lot of these are quality of life features. Voice acting is a big deal for those who struggle to focus on reading lots of text in-game, especially for an experience like Crowsworn, where every detail counts in unraveling the mysteries of the world. A game like Hades, for example, would have been difficult for me to fully experience with all the dialogue it has, but being fully voiced kept me engaged in an enjoyable experience for much longer. As of now, it looks like the rest of Crowsworn's goals are focused on adding new areas, so it's possible that what doesn't get funded will be added as post-launch DLC after what I'm sure will be a very successful launch for the team. I asked some people I know who chose to back the project, and all of them said the same type of thing. They're confident in the product's quality, and they feel the compensation for whatever reward tier they chose is worth it. Heck, the developers are even giving everyone who backs the project access to a joke Crow Kart minigame just because they can. One thing we could all agree on was that we definitely wanted our names attached to this project. There's one last thing we have to discuss when talking about the success of the Kickstarter, and that's the marketing. It's rare that a game from a new developer team will get so much attention from the public before its Kickstarter even finishes, but it's no coincidence. The developers have been doing interviews with popular Hollow Knight creators to get the project seen. Rusty hosted an interview stream just last week, and Relia did the same thing a few months back. The developers know where their audience is, and they know how they can reach them. It's actually something we're seeing a lot more now, which I can't complain about. It makes me wonder how the future of these Kickstarter indie games are going to look, though I do wish it wasn't so difficult for new indie games to get off the ground. But I guess that's a whole other discussion. Some final thoughts before closing. A few months ago I talked about some great games similar to Hollow Knight and Crowsworn, and today, if you're looking for some more recommendations to tie you over until whichever one of these comes out first, I have 2 more games you might want to check out. First of all, there's Unworthy, a Souls-like Metroidvania released in 2018 by one of the lead developers on Crowsworn. It's a little rough around the edges, but it reminds me of a more simplistic and mechanically grounded take on Blasphemous. It may not be for everyone, but I think it's interesting to see some of the developers' previous work, and it gives me more confidence in Crowsworn as a whole, given the experience gained from making a similar game. Next is a game that came out just a few days ago from publisher Devolver Digital. Death's Door is an action-heavy Zelda meets Souls-like with puzzles, exploration, and fast-paced combat. It may not be a Metroidvania in the traditional sense, but it has that familiar, intricate world design and atmosphere. Seriously, I just finished the game. It's easily a Game of the Year contender for me. Also, you play as a bird guy in both of these games. Highly recommend. So that's Crowsworn. Links to the Kickstarter in the description if you're interested. Really excited for this one, and I can't wait to play it. I know Kickstarters can be tough to manage, but I'm really glad it's working out for the team at Mongoose Rodeo. Let's see if we can reach a few more of those stretch goals, because there's only a few days left. Don't want to miss out on any new areas like Hollow Knight. We never did end up getting that massive abyss expansion with 4 new bosses.